Good morning, and welcome to the Wisconsin Coalition of Annuitants Virtual Conference. I am Diane Wilsinski, the current chair of the WCOA board. Every year we hold our conference to bring you up-to-date information on the Wisconsin retirement system and issues that affect our members. I hope you find the sessions today and tomorrow beneficial and share the information with those in your organizations. The Wisconsin Coalition of Annuitants consists of statewide and regional organizations represent retirees in the Wisconsin retirement system and may include active as well as retired participants in the system. The coalition exists to represent all of the approximate 238,000 Wisconsin retirement system retirees of the more than 692,000 system participants. Each member organization designates representatives to attend monthly meetings of the coalition, where guests from the State Investment Board, employee trust funds, legislative leaders, and members of boards and commissions provide input to active discussions on retirement issues. I would like to thank our guest speakers in advance for participating in this event. I would also like to thank our annual meeting committee members, Bob Schaefer, Sandy Drew, Roger Springman, Jeannie Stengel, and especially our webmaster, Rick Wojak, for the exceptional efforts in making this happen. I would also like to thank the panelists that are with us today. As part of this virtual meeting, you will be able to ask questions by pressing the Q&A button that can be found on your screen. Just click on the symbol and type in your question. Chris Wren will be the moderator and will collect the questions and present them to the speakers on your behalf. Speakers will respond to the questions at the end of their presentation. Please do not use the chat button. Our first speaker is Mr. John Volker. Mr. Volker is the current secretary of the Department of Employee Trust Funds. He became the secretary on April 5th, 2021. He served as the deputy secretary since 2014. He has been with the WRS for more than 33 years and appreciates the importance of a sustainable benefit program for members, communities, and employers. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Diane, and thanks for inviting me to this meeting on our annual basis. I think it's always good to touch base with everybody on the issues going on in the system. So let me just share my screen so I can get the presentation started. All right, so our journey today, or our discussion today about the, I think the WRS and ETF is really based on a book. It's a little old now. I think it was published in the early 2000s, like 2001. But the name of the book was Good to Great. And really the book is about the author, Jim Collins, and a team of his that really started doing a management study on different companies, ended up, I think, being about 29 or 30 companies that really had taken the leap from being a good company to a great company. And during their research, they really looked at that to determine what are the similar characteristics of these companies that we can point to that can lead to a company to go from good to great. So it's an interesting book. It's kind of summed up in this slide here. He really talked about each of the organizations had disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action. So why do I bring that up today? Because I think what we're going to talk about today is the WRS and ETF specifically's journey from good to great. So that'll be the foundation for my discussion today as we talk about the issues related to the WRS. So I said we're on a journey from good to great. I think it's important that we recognize all the good because WRS has a lot to offer when it talks about the good aspects of a pension system. So if you had the opportunity to read my column in the January newsletter, I won't be offended if you didn't, but if you had a chance to do that, I took a minute in my column to really touch on the positive aspects of the system. Now, I only had a few words to use because our communications folks put a limit on what I can say or how big a column I can have. But nonetheless, I want to dig into those same exact things I highlighted in the newsletter a little bit more in detail today. And when I talked about the WRS being a positive light in the things that are going on in the world today, I really talked about three things. One, the WRS being dependable, the WRS being supportive, and the WRS really through ETF being helpful. And these are three good qualities clearly that make us a good organization and good system. So let's dig into these a little bit more detail. So first, dependable. That is clearly a number one thing we have to be as a pension system. The one thing you want to make sure at all times is you have enough money to pay your liabilities. We want to make sure that all the annuitants that have earned these benefits can depend on the fact that the organization holding that money will be there to pay those benefits when they come due in terms of that monthly annuity. And as you can see on this graph, the WRS is hovering right around 100% funded, and which makes us unique. This is a good quality of the pension system. As you can see, this shows you a variety of other public pension systems around the country and where they fall on the funding scale. Unfortunately, there's a relatively small system way at the bottom. If you can see the bottom left-hand corner, looks to be about 25% funded. Then you see a whole slew of different pension systems in between that 25% and that really the highest one there seems to be about 105%. But you can see it's unusual for people to be around 100%, which is unusual considering the responsibilities we have as a pension system. But you can see the WRS is a relatively large system. We're about the 9th largest public pension system in the country, but we're right there at 100%. You can see the median and the aggregate are right there in the mid 70s, which points to the positive aspect of the WRS. You can see some actually very large circles right there that are right in the middle. Those are probably the California plans, CalSTRS and CalPERS, but they are still hovering between 70 and 80%, despite their large pool of members and revenues available. So clearly being dependable starts with being fully funded, and you can rest assured that we're hovering around that due to our design of our system. But not only are we fully funded today, I think it's critical to talk about this, especially in light of all the uncertainty in the markets today. And we can see the stock market jumping significantly from day to day, depending on what news hits the wire. And what you see here is the WRS is not just fully funded now. You can see over time, we go all the way back to 2001 in this graph, and that red line shows the WRS funding right around that 100%. We're probably a percentage point or two above or below that line all the way from 2001 to 2023. So not only are we dependable right now, you can see that we've gone through a variety of different market losses and still maintained that funding level, which I think is really a good thing to think of now, especially with all the uncertainty. Will there be a recession? Won't there be a recession? What's going to happen in the market? You can see that over time, the WRS has continually hovered around that 100%, making it very dependable. What's interesting to me on this is you can see the national data of the other public pension plans in the country. You can see at one point they were higher in that funding level in that upper left-hand corner than even the WRS. But then the dot-com problem in 2000 through 2002, big problems in the market, they went down. And why did they go down? Because they don't have the risk-sharing features that the WRS does. They couldn't adjust to the fact that the market did not bring in enough investment income. And then they muddle around somewhere between 80 and 100%. And then 2008 happens. We know that was a brutal year for the markets as well. It was for SWIB as well. They were minus 20-some% in their investment returns. But what happened to the red line? The red line stayed up there 100%. The blue line went down further. Again, those systems not very resilient to the change in circumstances. And they got down, now they're, as we know, in that mid 70s range, and they have really struggled since then to raise the funding level of their systems. So not only is the WRS dependable, when we look at it as a snapshot today, we can see that it has been resilient and dependable over all different kind of markets, which is critically important. All right, so we can check the box off as being a good organization when it comes to dependable. Let's look at supportive. And as we look at supportive, we're going to start with communities. So that doesn't come to mind to most people right away when you talk about a public pension system. Who does it support? Clearly annuitants come to mind first, but we're going to start by talking about communities, because the numbers show us, and this is a study that just came out, I think earlier this year, January or so, from the National Institute on Retirement Security. They periodically put out a publication called Pensionomics, and each time they put this out, they look at different states and they say, okay, what is really the return on investment of having a defined benefit plan in your state? And as they looked at the Wisconsin numbers and they looked at the WRS, the first thing they look at is, okay, how much goes back into the community for what we pay out? So that box on the left, the blue box, shows for every dollar that we're paying in pension benefits to retirees, $1.28 comes back out. So you're supporting where you live, the communities where you live, with $1.28 coming back out. So that really does support communities. And when you look around on a map on where we send annuities and the annuity deposits, you'll see every county in the state has somebody getting an annuity. So that goes back into those communities. And then maybe even a bigger factor is when a lot of times people talk about defined benefit programs, they talk about, are they really sustainable? Do taxpayers have to pay too much into these to make them sustainable? Can you really maintain a high quality defined benefit program on the backs of taxpayers, is how some might put it. In fact, last year I was at a conference at the Hoover Institute at Stanford. I was invited to talk, and it was really, the title of the conference was the current and future of defined benefit programs. And really the theme of the program was, it's really questionable if these types of setups can be maintained over time. I think I was the minority of the invites to come and talk about that. Really, it is possible if you have the right features built into your plan. And if you look at the WRS and the taxpayer investment factor, let's call it the ROI on taxes people are paying throughout the state, you'll see for every dollar contributed by taxpayers over the last 30 years, almost $8 has come back out. So I would say that is a very good return on investment for those folks that are paying taxes and for those getting the annuities. So it is clearly a positive for Wisconsin, and specifically for the communities where our retirees live. And from what we know on the demographics, about 85% of our retirees do stay in Wisconsin after they retire, at least for some time of the year. So that money is being spent right here. So why is that? Why, as you look at that, I can show you a little more detail. This low level of tax support required. This is a study done by the National Association of Retirement Administrators, and they really looked at what percentage of budgets for public systems are out there. And then they look at this, and you can see state and local governments in Wisconsin spend about only 2% of their budgets funding the public pension system, which is significantly lower than the national average. You see that at just over 5%. So why is that? Well, one thing is, as I just showed you, a lot of those systems are not fully funded, so they're trying to catch up and improve their funding level. And to do that, there's two sources of revenue in order to do that. One is through contributions, which will be partly paid by taxpayer dollars, partly by employees, and the other part is investment income. So they either have to be aggressive on their investment income to make up the difference, or they have to raise contributions, or they have to do both to try to get to a better funding level. So a lot of systems across the country have done that. They've raised contributions in order to either maintain their current level of funding or to try to increase it. So more public or taxpayer dollars are needed to fund the system. The other part about that, as I just said, is investment income. And in Wisconsin, we're quite fortunate. So this pie chart really digs into that revenue from investment income that I just talked about. So if we look at the pie chart on the right, that's the WRS, and it's over 30 years. And we say how much of the total amount of revenue that comes into the WRS comes from investment income. And if you could look at that big green part of the pie is what we like to see, and you can see it's 78%. So of all the revenue we need to make sure we stay dependable, stay at 100% funded, almost 80% of that is actually coming from investment income. So that explains to you why the tax burden is less for different budgets, because we only have to make up 20% in the contribution part, and we split that equally. So in our case, 78% is coming from SWIB's hard work, 11% from employees, and then 11% from employers. And then you shift your eyes to the left side of the screen and you look at overall public pensions in the country over that same time period, those 30 years. And you can see that green part of the pie chart is significantly less. So they're closer to 60% coming from investment earnings. We're closer to 80. So it's not hard to do the math, especially when they're not equally distributing the contribution pay-ins equally like we do in Wisconsin. The employer is making a bigger portion of that almost 40% of the revenue that they need to fund their system. So as you can see, that employer is now paying 28% into the system to keep it funded, while in Wisconsin, they're only paying 11. So that translates into the fact that less taxpayer money has to be spent to fund the system, and you get to a point where only 2% of budgets are actually going toward funding the pension. So we are in a very good position here as well. Another good feature of the system, we know that we're dependable. Now we know that not only are we dependable, that the money we send out into the communities is for the benefit of the communities, and the communities as a whole do not have to pay a significant amount of taxes to have that happen. So that's why we always continue to be highlighted around the country as one of the model plan designs around. All right, so who else do we support? Well, clearly we support annuitants. So not only do we support communities, but then we look at the folks that have earned a benefit that we're paying annuities to every month. And then we add on to those annuities with an annuity adjustment, hopefully every year after you retire. If we just look at over the last decade or so here, it's about 11 years, we go all the way back to 2014. And we just pause and look at the gold bar, the gold for money, I guess. We're providing you annuity adjustments. And except for 2018, you can see that an annuity adjustment has been provided. And it's all over the board on how much that might have been, to a low of just 0.5% in 2015 to that high of 7.4% in 2021. The 7.4% in 2021 actually was the highest annuity adjustment we had provided since 1999. So quite an accomplishment. Again, we can thank our friends at SWIB for that level of annuity adjustment. And that's what makes the WRS unique in some places, is that really our annuity adjustment, or some places call it a COLA, is based on what revenue we have coming into the system, specifically investment income. And as you can see, even though the investment income is, that blue line has been all over the map. It goes from just over 5% down to minus 0.4, back way up, then back to -3, then back way up, and then back down to -12. So despite that, roller coaster of investment returns, annuity adjustments have continued in varying degrees. So that is helpful to our annuitants. The key is it's not as variable as the investment returns, because our system uses a smooth rate of return, which is 5 years that we look at, and we smooth it out. We call it the effective rate, which is that red line. So when we look at that red line, that smooths out the variability. for us to be able to pay annuities. And anytime that red line is above 5%, we can then pay out an annuity. And as you can see, that's perfectly illustrated in 2018, right there in the middle. The 5% was the smooth rate. We need to be over 5% to pay an annuity adjustment, and there was no annuity adjustment that year as a result. But then we have a number of very good years in investment return. We get this effective rate up to 12.9%, and again, then we get a 7.4% annuity adjustment. So a good feature of the system is we're only paying out money that we have, and we do that by looking at investment return and smoothing it over 5 years, and then paying the difference basically out to annuitants. So that does support annuitants going forward. If we just look at a way to measure that is, do you keep up with inflation? Here's just a few examples we can look at to see if we are really keeping up with inflation. There's two graphs here, two bar charts. The one on the left says, if you retired in 2010 and we look at your base annuity and start adding on some accumulated dividends up to 2025, you get to just over $30,000 in this example. And you can see that red line, which shows what your annuity would be with CPI, slightly under that. Very close, but slightly under. It's the same story if you would have retired in 2015. You get very close to CPI, not exactly on it or above it. Interesting enough, if you've just recently retired in 2020, you can see you're right on the CPI, even though there's some of the highest inflation years that we have had over the last 5 years. We are still able to support annuitants by keeping up with inflation over that high inflationary period. Again, we can thank our friends at SWIB for some high investment returns over that same period of time. Now, I will admit that if you happen to retire before 2008, your graphs aren't as rosy. The gap between what you've gotten in annuity adjustments and your base annuity has a little bigger gap than some of these examples. And why is that? That's because we all know between 2008 and a few years after that, there were negative annuity adjustments for the first time in WRS history. And as a result, you wouldn't have kept up with inflation quite as well as these examples. But again, the ability of the WRS to adjust it based on investment income and actually reduce the amount we're paying in annuity adjustments is one of those features that keeps that red line of that slide a few slides ago right above 100%, while our other pension plans across the country are declining. All right, so enough of the past. I'm sure you're more interested in what you can expect for an annuity adjustment going forward in support of you. So here's a couple of projections. Now, these are just projections, so just to give you some idea on what's on the horizon as far as annuity adjustments. If you look at this table, it starts with 2024. We know that SWIB earned 8.5% last year, puts that smooth rate 7.5%, so it was above 5%, so you got a 2.3% annuity adjustment. So this year, it's 2025. Our actuaries always assume that SWIB is going to make 6.8%. That's what we call our assumed rate. And you can see if SWIB meets that assumed rate, we'll have just about a 1% annuity adjustment in 2025. If that 6.8% continues over the next 3 years subsequent to that, you can actually see for the second time in WRS history, there could be a negative annuity adjustment. Not a huge one, right around 1%, but nonetheless, you can see that effective rate has dipped under 5%, which says we can't give you an annuity adjustment. In fact, we have to make up the difference between that 5% and where we're at, so we need to take some money back. Now, thankfully, if that 6.8% continues, we bounce right back up to that mid 2.5% annuity adjustments going forward. So a bit of a blip on the radar screen, and that's because that negative 12% reduction that they had in performance a couple of years ago is having a significant impact on that 5-year smooth return. Okay, so what if SWIB only gets to 0 or no investment return at all? And as you know, the most recent publication on what their investment earnings are to date shows them just over 1%. So I guess 0% is not out of the question. So if it was 0%, there would be no annuity adjustment this year, because you can see that smooth rate is right around 5%. And then you bounce back up to 6.8. But even with that 6.8% bump, that negative annuity adjustment is increased up to about 3%. So that increase, or that 0% versus 6.8, actually doesn't result in a negative annuity adjustment this year, but could increase what that negative annuity adjustment looks like the following year. Again, we bounce back up, but not quite to the same level as we did in the previous slide. All right, then the scenario we keep an eye on, which we never want to happen, is what has to happen in 2025 for the negative annuity adjustment to actually happen this year. And for that to happen, SWIB's performance would have to be a minus 5%. If they got to minus 5%, that effective rate drops all the way down to 3.4%, clearly under the 5% we need to pay an annuity adjustment. And as a result, we take money back or off the annuity adjustment. So it's could be a negative annuity adjustment of 1.5%, leading to still another negative annuity adjustment in 2026 to right around 3.5%. And then we get out of the negative, but we still aren't paying anything. We're zero in 2027, and then 2028 will be zero or slightly less than that. So that is a scenario we don't want to see happen, but just to give you some idea of what needs to happen for that negative annuity adjustment to come all the way into current assessment, minus 5%. I never like to leave my projections on the red part of the numbers. So what needs to happen for that negative annuity adjustment to go away in the next few years? Well, basically what needs to happen is SWIB has to navigate this volatile 2025 by finding a way to get to 9.7. If they got to 9.7 investment return in 2025 and then return to that 6.8%, you can see we got that effective rate back up over 5. We can pay an annuity adjustment this year, and we're right around 5 in 2026, so no negative annuity adjustment. And then we continue to pay that 2.5 to 3% going forward. So as we monitor SWIB's returns, we want to see them closer to the 9.7 to the minus 5, but nonetheless, that's what we're looking at going forward. At 2026 has a distinct possibility of being in the red, mainly because of that minus 12% that happened a couple of years ago. Okay, our last category of being good, which is being helpful. And this really comes down to ETF and what we do here at ETF. What makes us a good organization in terms of being helpful? Here's just some numbers for you to digest on what goes on an annual basis here at ETF. We have between 180,000 and 200,000 calls every year from people calling with questions, calling with concerns about their benefits that we have to, hats off to the people in our call center and our outreach area, do a fantastic job of answering those questions. And I'll get to that in just a minute. You can see we have between 18,000 and 20,000 emails from members asking for assistance that we always reply to. And then we're out in the field, either here in Madison when people walk in to get some type of outreach or education, or we're around the state. We send our outreach folks around the state to talk to different groups about benefits, what they can expect from their benefits, how to make best use of their benefits, and how they can prepare to be financially secure in retirement. So a lot of good work going on, and that bore out by some of the comments we get. Here are just a few actual quotes we've gotten from members based on their interaction with us here at ETF. You can see that top left one, Kirsten was very pleasant, but you can see answered all the questions. If you go to the bottom left box, I'm not going to read all these, but you can see answered all the questions with confidence. The upper right-hand one, very helpful. I was able to understand. Again, in the bottom right, answered all my questions. So that's what we want to see. We want to make sure that when you're calling us, we're answering your questions. I think the information we have says we're doing that very well, which what tells me we are a good organization. We can continue. I can fill a lot of slides with this, but I'll stop at two. Really more quotes from our members as it relates to what we do here at ETF. Again, this is more on our outreach. Appreciate the facilitator's knowledge. We have videos that we provide, and this one provided some super helpful information to this person, which is great. We also reach out to people kind of proactively. That bottom left-hand quote is really about an email we sent to someone that got to 55, to their minimum retirement age, said, hey, you can retire if you want, which people like to be reminded of, that maybe it's not too far away. The upper right-hand corner, great. Wow, you never cease to amaze me. That's what we like to see. And of course, my favorite one on all of that is, good morning, John. I read your piece in the ETF news publication, and I did a great job. So I even get compliments, even though most of the hard work is being done by our call center and our outreach folks. Every once in a while, even I get a compliment. So that's always nice to see as well. So I've talked about all this good at the organization. I talked about all this good things that are part of the WRS. So why did I start my presentation saying from good to great? It's because I think we can do better. I think we can move from good to great. We are a very good organization. We have a very good WRS design, but we can go to great. And I'm convinced we can go to great. And that was pretty much my mission from the time the ETF board hired me 4+ years ago, was to take this organization from good to great. So if we go back to the book, I talked a little bit about what they found as characteristics of organizations that go from good to great. What do you have to have? What are those things that really make the difference from you being able to accomplish this transformation? Well, the first thing they say is it doesn't happen overnight. It's kind of like pushing a flywheel from going from good to great. You give it a little nudge and it moves a little bit. It's heavy. You give it a little nudge, another nudge, it goes a little bit further, but still kind of hard to push. You continue with one push after another. And then finally, as you know, with a flywheel, when you get to a certain part, all of a sudden the flywheel will start to take over some of the work. And then the momentum starts to build. You don't have to push as hard. And the next thing you know, according to the book, you have a breakthrough and you're on your way to transform from good to great. And that's what I think we've been doing since I became secretary. We continue to push that flywheel. We have a great amount of momentum at the moment. And I think we're on the verge of getting to a point where we're going to have a breakthrough, but we continue to push that flywheel. What Mr. Collins also found in his book is there's these disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action has to be embedded in the organization to make this transformation work. And when we look at that in Wisconsin or here at ETF, disciplined people. A quote from the book, ferocious resolve and almost stoic determination to do whatever needs to be done to make the company great. And that needs to be part of your organization. And I am proud of all the people in the organization because you can find every last one of person that is at ETF has a great sense of purpose in what they do and who they do it for. And we do have a stoic determination to do whatever needs to be done to make us great. And I think the best way to illustrate this is what we've been trying to do to bring resources into the organization to make us in a position to go from good to great. If we go back to the last budget, not the one that's pending downtown at the moment, but our last biennial budget, we were pretty aggressive. I asked for 16 positions for ETF, which is aggressive for an agency our size in a state budget process, because I really thought that was necessary for continuous to push that flywheel. And if you look at the areas that we asked for resources, the first was to replace our outdated technology. This is by far one of the biggest priorities we have in order to get that flywheel to get to that breakthrough portion. So we ended up getting 7 positions in that area. We also got, you can see that $3.6 million in 1 year and $8.1 million in the second year to help us pay for updated IT systems, which we're using effectively at the moment. And then the other part about that is not only do we need the technology, we need to make sure we have the people there to do the work that are customer facing. So we really asked for additional people to help our critical customer service aspects of our organization. Now, I think we did quite well, and thankfully it's organizations like the coalitions of annuitants, WREA, and other organizations were out there supporting us in our budget request, even though it was aggressive. And I think that really did help us. That grassroots support really pushed us. So we got 12 of 16, which, if you're familiar with state budgeting, I think we can all say is a success. And I think we've continued that stoic determination to do that this year as well. So if you look at our 2025-2027 biennial budget request, again, aggressive. We've asked for 9 positions. I didn't think we'd ask for quite so many because I asked for so many last time. But as I looked at what we needed to get done, where we were going, how can we get from good to great, I concluded we had to be fairly aggressive again this time. So we asked for 9 positions. We also asked that top box there, replacement of a pension administration system. We need to replace a number of systems within ETF for us to get to a modern system. We currently have 17 systems that run the WRS. Some of them talk to each other, some of them don't. One's 30 plus years old. That is not how you get from good to great. We need to get from good to great. We need to do it by having modern technology so we can best serve our members. So we need to get money to put in a new pension administration system so we can process retirement applications, we can pay out annuities, we can make sure that we're accounting for things appropriately. We need a new system to do that. So we've asked for $14.2 million to replace the legacy pension system. So that is clearly our number one priority in the budget this time around. We cannot make any real headway with being the type of organization we want to be unless we get that money for the new technology. Moving on, we've also asked for some positions to improve our risk management and information security. Really important here is the information security aspect of this request. We've asked for a couple positions. As we move in a direction where we're going to provide you the opportunity to interact with us more online through these new systems. You can process forms online, you can check your account, you can do various things you can't do now. That opens us up to more risk because now cyber criminals can access those things if they get a password or do something like that. And we want to make sure we're putting in new systems, but also secure systems. So we've asked the legislature to give us some additional resources. So as we put new systems in, we can make sure they're safe for you as well. Again, we're not backing off the need to have people in positions to serve our customers. So we've asked for more critical customer service positions, 2 in the call center. The call center, we've had over demographics for the whole WRS, we've had a 30% increase in annuitants over the last decade. Annuitants call our call center more than other aspects of our members, and that has put additional pressure on our call center. I'm not comfortable where we're at with service levels, so we want to add to the number of people in our call center to make sure we're serving you appropriately. So you're not on hold too long, you get the answers to your questions in a timely basis. So we've asked the legislature for additional positions in that as well. Then we've asked for a position to help us interact with our actuaries. Clearly, the calculations of actuaries are critically important for us to set contributions rate right, to pay annuities correctly, making sure that the system stays strong going forward. But we do not have anyone on staff that actually has actuarial experience, and we would like to make sure we do so we can best interact with our actuaries to make sure that oversight is there and that we are comfortable that everything is moving in the right direction. And then the last thing we asked for is increased autonomy to manage our personnel. I think it's important if we're going to go from good to great that we have the ability to get the right people in the right spots at the right time. And sometimes we have additional bureaucracy downtown that limits our ability to do that on a timely basis. So we've asked for some increased autonomy for us to do that. So that's the disciplined people. We have people really determined to do what's right. We have people in a position to do what's right, and we're fighting hard downtown so we can have the resources to continue to move us in the right direction. So then you look at disciplined thought. One of the things that's in the book I thought was very appropriate is you have to confront the brutal facts. What's not going the way you necessarily want it to do, but while you do look at the brutal facts, you have to maintain that unwavering faith that you will get it done, you'll prevail even if there's difficulties, and you can overcome whatever is facing you. And right now, I think the best example of that is we're in the process of putting in a new system. It's going to replace our insurance system that we currently have. And we're going to put in a system, just showing you a preview of the interface that you'll have to select your health benefits and other insurance benefits. It's called My Insurance. And you'll be able to go in and you can see your health, you can see your pharmacy, you can see wellness, all the different aspects that are part of your health benefit if you continue to have health benefits through us. And it has been a challenge to get this system in. We did get money in the last budget to do that. We're in the home stretch. But if we just take those words from the book, you have to confront the brutal facts. And we do have some brutal facts to think about when it comes to implementing a system like this. The brutal facts are we have to put in a system that can service 900 employers. And everybody is different. Some are small, some are big, some use our health insurance different than others. So we have to make sure that varied needs are accomplished in the system. We also have multiple vendors, which makes it even more difficult. We have 10 plus health insurance companies that we contract with. We need to interact with them. We need to get data from them. We need to give them data to make sure that eligibility and enrollment is done accurately. We have a life insurance vendor. We have an income continuation vendor. All those folks, our interaction with them, having accurate data, having good communication is critical for us to do a good job. So that makes it quite complicated for us to put in a system like this. We also have to make sure that it works not only for active employees, which have one way of signing up for benefits, we also have to make sure it works for the retiree population, has a different way of signing up and paying for their benefits. We have to make sure it works for them. They are complex. The health insurance is complex. Life insurance is complex. Income continuation can be complex. Currently, as we sit today, our vendor has not fully provided functionality for everything that we need to get done. So we're continuing to work with them to get that accomplished. And we know even after we get to an implementation date, we'll have to fix some things after that. We know it's not going to be perfect on day one. Hopefully everybody that's using the system will be patient with us as we put these new systems in, because over the long run, you're going to see a much better level of service. But we do know that there's always bumps in the road when new systems go in. So we know those are the brutal facts. That's what we're wrestling with. But I am proud to say that we will be going live with one aspect of this system in July. At one point, we thought we might go with all active employees and retirees at the same time. We've reconsidered that approach, and we are just going to go with the implementation for the UW system on July. And we'll follow back with all the rest of the actives and the retirees in March of 2026. We're doing that for a variety of reasons. One is the UW is putting in a new HR system, and they would really like to have access to our new insurance system at the same time. So we're going to support them by going ahead and implementing on July 1. That will also allow us to identify any potential glitches in the system and get those fixed before you as retirees are using the system in 2026. So I'm optimistic we're going to have this insurance system in place here over the next few months. That'll be one step closer for us to be going good to great. It's another nudge of that flywheel. And then as we get going on a new pension system, assuming that the legislature supports us and the governor supports us in giving us the money for that pension system, I think then we'll be really close to that breakthrough going from good to great. So then the last aspect of the book says you need disciplined action. Now, I don't expect you to see all these tiny words here, but this really is our to-do list. This is our action plan for ETF. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, that blue circle, that's kind of where we are now. That, you could say, is good. Our current state, we're serving customers as we can. And we do a great job of it. We saw those quotes in that slide a few slides ago of how well we do. but we only serve people really between 7:45 and 5 o'clock. We don't offer really any substantial services over the weekend, at night. And in this day and age, people are expect to be able to do those type of things online. So we want to get there. And if you go up to the upper right-hand corner, that darker blue box, or circle, I should say, is future state. We want to go from serving customers as we can to that upper right-hand circle, which is supporting our customers in the way they prefer. If you prefer the call center, we'll be here for you. If you prefer online interaction with us, we'll be here for you. If you want to look at your account information online, we'll be here for you. So that circle, the dark blue circle, is great. We want to go from light blue to dark blue, and everything in between there are the things we need to get done. Thankfully, you can see a number of those things have check boxes in, but you can see we still have some work to do between that light blue box and that dark blue box. We continue to do that on disciplined thought, disciplined action, disciplined people, and I think we continue to push that flywheel forward. So really, as I sum up our journey today, I said we're going to take a journey and talk a little bit from good to great. I think we can all agree the WRS is in a very strong position. ETF is a very good organization. I don't see any reason to doubt the stability and the dependability of the WRS, despite the uncertainty in the markets and the up and down nature of what we're seeing in the markets. We're well designed in that regard. But I think you can look forward to us doing even a better job. And if I do my job and can convince people downtown, which I have been doing, and I'll do again tomorrow and Thursday, I'll go downtown and talk to people at the Capitol. We can get the resources we need and continue the hard work people here at ETF are doing to get us to that point where we are great. So I am going to wrap up on that comment. I appreciate the time I get to spend with you every year at this conference. I'm also thankful we're able to help publicize the conference through our publications. Sounds like you got a good turnout for this conference, so I'm glad we were able to assist in that way as well.
Well, John, Chris, thank you so much. It's always good to hear from you, John. Okay. Our next speakers are Adam Goldberg, AARP Senior Legislative Representative, and Lisa Lampkins, AARP Campaign Strategic Advisor. Adam advocates for underserved communities and vulnerable populations, and Lisa has a passion for developing and managing strategic federal, state, and local campaigns, delivering results for older Wisconsinites and their families. They're going to give us an update on the federal picture and maybe what to expect in coming months, and also talk about what we can do for advocacy issues, especially that impact our age group. So Adam and Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to go first, and I really appreciate all of you for having us and for the opportunity to talk to you about some of 2025's major federal legislative issues for ARP. You know, one thing I want to clarify is I am an employee of ARP, but I am part of a team within ARP called the NRTA, the National Retired Teachers Association. And that's where I do most of my work working with people like Diane. So first, I'd like to say something about ARP and NRTA. So NRTA is ARP's educator community is America's largest national organization representing the interests of age 50 plus educators. NRTA works with a national network of 850,000 retired educators and 2,400 local units associated with retired educators associations in virtually every state across the nation. And this, of course, includes the Wisconsin Retired Educators Association. NRTA was founded in 1947 by Dr. Ethel Percy-Andrus, a retired high school principal, after she found a former teacher living in a chicken coop. She knew that something had to be done to address the economic challenges and health insurance needs of retired educators. And 11 years later, Dr. Andrus founded ARP to serve the needs of Americans more broadly. And in 1982, NRTA became a part of ARP, which is why, as someone who works on the NRTA team, I am part of ARP. And I think that brief history demonstrates who we are at ARP and what we're all about. And it brings us nicely to discussing what's going on today, what matters to NRTA, to ARP, and some of the things that I think are important to know for the people you represent and your causes. Much of my focus today will be on federal legislation where AARP has a very active government affairs department that works with Congress and the administration on a large set of issues of importance to AARP members, people 50 plus generally, and really all Americans. But you should also know that AARP has offices in every state, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And in each of those offices, we have people working on both the state level and in some cases local level legislation. And that does include there in Wisconsin. AARP Wisconsin's priorities for state level in 2025 and 2026 relate to health security issues, retirement savings, fraud prevention, consumer protection, high speed internet, housing and transportation access, low cost utilities, and access to voting and voter education. That work is incredibly important. And if you're interested in hearing more about what our Wisconsin office is up to, or you might want to volunteer with them to work on these issues, I'd certainly encourage you to get in contact. But now let me talk a little bit about what is happening here in Washington, which is where I live and work, and what AARP's priorities are for the current Congress. Now, I was asked to preface what I discuss with some analysis on the political landscape in Washington. And I suppose that's critical to understanding the prospects of things getting done in DC. But AARP is nonpartisan. That's essential for the work we do. So there's going to be no political commentary from me today. Suffice it to say, it's no secret that there's been gridlock in Washington for quite a while. That's not new with the most recent elections. Both houses of Congress are currently controlled by Republicans, but by the narrowest of margins, which makes passage of legislation very difficult, though not impossible. We certainly can expect, or at least hope, that later this year there will be passage of the annual appropriations bills to keep government running. But will there be anything else done of major significance? The short answer is who knows. It's possible, but I don't have any suggestions for you as to what that would be other than a tax bill, which I'll touch on in a moment. Time, circumstances, a groundswell in public opinion, all these things can affect the political and policy dynamics in a relatively evenly divided Congress. So that mix can lead to something significant happening, or there just might be an issue that has broad support that somehow moves even in a gridlock divided Congress. But if one party controls both Congress and the White House, as is the case now, that one party control can also affect what gets done, if that party can find the unity act. And that's really tough to do. It is easier to get partisan legislation through the House of Representatives where you only need a majority. But in the Senate, it's a lot tougher where you need 60 out of 100 votes to move legislation because of the filibuster. If you're a political junkie, now is a great time to watch what happens in Congress. Seeing how a party with narrow control of both houses tries to pull together all of their factions to pass legislation, or sometimes to rely on votes from the minority party, all while juggling the interests of the White House and their voters. So you got to remember, there are congressional elections in 2026 where all of the seats in the House are up, as well as 1/3 of the Senate, not to mention 36 governorships and over 6,000 legislative seats in 46 states. That's 88 of the 99 legislative chambers at the state level. Of course, those elections will include many in Wisconsin, which will be all of your statewide offices, one Supreme Court seat, 17 state Senate seats, and all 99 seats in the Assembly. And all of that's in addition to governors and state legislative races in New Jersey and Virginia this year. And those are just the regularly scheduled elections. There'll be a number of special elections because of vacancies in the U.S. House of Representatives between now and November in 2026. And those elections could affect the balance of power in Congress this year. So if I go back to my earlier comment about not knowing exactly what's going to happen in this Congress, that's part of the reason. Politics and policy will overlap and intersect for good or ill over the next 18 months prior to those midterm elections. There's no doubt about that. So as I was preparing what to say to you all today, I really wasn't sure how much to get into the weeds on just how Congress will go about working on anything, including that tax bill that I alluded to earlier, or on the cuts necessary to pass a bill with such a high price tag. And if you watch the news today, these are the discussions that's happening right now here in Washington. I think it's at least important to mention. And I promise not to get too technical, if only because I don't really understand all of the technicalities of what's going on. Congress is using a procedure called budget reconciliation to get this tax bill through. They can only use it once this year, but it does mean they only need 51 votes to pass it through the Senate. So they only need a majority. Now, to fund that tax cut, they will most likely need to make major cuts to things like Medicare and Medicaid, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Spoiler alert, though, ARP would oppose those cuts. I mention this to say, just watch what's going on in Congress right now, because there are members of both parties who are leery of these cuts because so many of their constituents get their access to healthcare through these programs. So just how they will fund the bill, or even if they can agree on how to do it, remains a bit of a mystery, not just to me, but to those who are trying to put this together. Now, I should also digress a bit to say that passage of legislation generally does not seem to be a high priority for this Congress, at least right now. So far, Congress has passed just 5 pieces of legislation that have been signed into law by the president, including only 2 substantive bills. That's the lowest number of bills signed into law at this stage of a new Congress in 70 years. Additionally, you may have heard about the large number of executive orders signed by the president. He's signed more executive orders than any president at this point in his term since Roosevelt in the 1930s. The way things are done in Washington has shifted a bit. So we need to be aware that knowing how things have been done traditionally doesn't necessarily reflect how they're being done now. I'm sorry to throw in that discussion of process when you all want to hear about policy, but it's all something to keep an eye on because this month is what's consuming time in Congress and it's all a bit messy. And that mess, one of the things that they say is there are 2 things you don't want to see being made: laws and sausages. And I was thinking about the fact that I'm talking to a group of Wisconsinites where brats are king. So I figured you could handle some of the messiness of the laws as well as the sausage making. So, let's move from that, though, to discussing some of ARP's federal legislative priorities for 2025. First, let's chat about working family caregivers who have stepped up to care for their loved ones, often to the detriment of their careers, jobs, and finances. This is one of ARP's major initiatives for this year. On average, family caregivers spend over $7,200 annually out of pocket on caregiving expenses. Our research shows that 42% of caregivers quit their jobs or cut down their hours because of caregiving responsibilities. By caring for a mom, dad, sister, or brother, they keep them at home where they want to be and not in costly taxpayer-funded institutional care. ARP wants to support these hardworking Americans that are the backbone of our long-term care system. And we can support families without expanding government and by letting people keep more of their own money when they are providing this caregiving work at home. So currently, ARP's top tax priority is ensuring that Congress and the president provide financial relief for working family caregivers through the bipartisan Credit for Caring Act, which would provide some much needed financial relief to working family caregivers. The bill can help incentivize and support people to stay in the workforce because you can only get the credit if you're working. The bill strengthens families and communities at the same time. It would provide a non-refundable federal tax credit for up to $5,000 for eligible working family caregivers to help offset a portion of their out-of-pocket caregiving costs, including costs that may help them continue to work. The credit can help offset a portion of costs such as a home care aid, specific home modifications, assistive technology, respite care to give a family caregiver a temporary break, transportation costs, and other supports that help caregivers and their loved ones. The tax credit would help eligible caregivers who care for a loved one of all ages, such as a parent or grandparent, a child with a disability, a sibling, or even an aunt or an uncle. We're pushing hard for the Credit for Caring Act to be included in the tax cut bill that I mentioned earlier, which is being drafted as we speak. But we should also talk about prescription drug prices. Congress must do more to lower prescription drug prices and to increase transparency, accountability, and competition in the prescription drug market and supply chain. Last Congress, there were 5 strong bipartisan Senate bills that would unleash competition and help get more safe, affordable drugs to all Americans. The bills would help close loopholes that are preventing availability of lower cost generic drugs and crack down on big drug companies' anti-competitive practices. We'll be supporting these proposals when they're reintroduced in the current Congress. You might also have heard that the president issued an executive order to try to lower prescription drug prices just yesterday. The aim would be to reduce prices of certain drugs. It's unclear right now, at least to me, which ones those will be. But that's both in the commercial market and in Medicare and Medicaid. ARP applauded the president's announcement, but there's still more to learn about how this will work, or indeed if there is a need for congressional action to make it happen. But we here at ARP will also be continuing to fight to ensure that the Social Security Administration continues to provide customer service to the millions of Americans who've paid into the system. Now, before I get into that, I just want to mention that tomorrow you're going to be hearing from another one of our colleagues, Joel Eskovitz, who is an expert on the Social Security system, and he'll talk a little bit more about solvency, which is something I'm not going to touch on today. But I do really want to touch on the customer service, because we consistently hear how vital Social Security is to older Americans and how much they depend on the services provided by the Social Security Administration, whether it be over the phone, online, or face-to-face at local field offices. We often hear our members' frustrations, or worse, when they can't get good customer service from SSA. And some of you may have experienced that. What was once a persistent concern has now become a crisis. Our members are deeply concerned by the rapid deterioration in Social Security customer service. SSA has confirmed to ARP that beginning back on April 14th, they'll allow all claim types to be completed over the telephone as they previously had been. This includes retirement, survivors, and auxiliary benefits that SSA previously announced would require in-person identity proofing, in addition to Social Security disability insurance, Medicare, and SSI. Now, that's great news, but we know there's more that needs to be done to correct the longstanding customer service issues at the Social Security Administration, and we will keep fighting to make that happen. Medicaid is a lifeline for millions of older Americans, ensuring they can age at home, receive essential health care, or access nursing home care if they're not going to be staying at home. As Congress considers funding and policy changes, it's critical to protect the people who depend on Medicaid, not weaken their access to care. Medicaid provides health care coverage for more than 17 million people aged 50 and over, including 1 in 5 people with Medicare. ARP opposes any proposals that would cut services, restrict eligibility, shift costs to states, or burden older Americans with additional red tape or reporting requirements. ARP would welcome the long overdue debate about how to address the challenges of an aging population, which should absolutely involve reforms to remove Medicaid's bias towards institutional care and increase support for families who take care of their loved ones at home, as I mentioned earlier. Large-scale cuts, however, threaten millions of seniors with disruption to the care that they need. On another issue for our most vulnerable seniors, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP's, a lifeline, especially in these times of high grocery prices, which I know you're all noticing because I certainly am. More than 11 million older adults 50 plus receive assistance from the Supplemental Nutrition Program, with many more eligible but unenrolled in the program. After years of decline, food insecurity among older Americans is on the rise, with 12.6 million, that's 1 in 10, struggling to access adequate nutrition in 2023, which is the latest year we have statistics for. With rising food prices, rising food insecurity, and a growing aging population, it's more important than ever to connect eligible adults to SNAP and other nutrition assistance. So ARP is urging Congress to protect the millions of older Americans who are able to put food on their tables thanks to SNAP. There are other issues that ARP is engaged on at the federal level, but I won't be touching on them today. But we will, as always, work to promote the interests of people 50 plus in Washington. There is, however, one last set of issues I want to chat about that relate to any pension legislation that might arise at the federal level, which could affect at least some of you here in Wisconsin if you've also worked at the federal level at some point in your career. And fortunately, right now, it's only those federal workers that would be affected by the legislation going through Congress. So the budget resolution that started all of this off, that gets us to the budget reconciliation and the tax bill I've been talking about, instructs the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to find at least $50 billion in savings over the next 10 years. And federal retirement and healthcare are the largest programs over which that committee has jurisdiction. They're looking at raising the retirement contribution rate for some federal employees, eliminating an annuity supplement for those eligible to retire before the age of 62, and reducing federal pension benefit spending by basing a retiree's annuity payment on their average highest 5 earning years instead of the current 3. All that would save $45 billion over 10 years. And there are a couple of other pension-related actions that they're moving forward on that could save another $5 billion. In addition, they would require a comprehensive audit of employee dependents currently enrolled in federal employee health benefits plans, such as verifying marriage certificates and birth certificates, and require any ineligible individual found to be receiving FEHB coverage to be disenrolled, which would save another $1.5 billion. Those levels of cuts in just one area that I'm discussing today could be quite large, so it's something to keep an eye on as we look toward Congress finding areas to cut, as members are also looking to fashion that tax bill. Now, given that I just talked about federal pensions, I would really be remiss if I didn't at least mention one big state-level pension effort, and that's in Alaska. Several years ago, the state eliminated their defined benefit pension plan for public employees. What ensued was workers leaving the state and difficulties in recruiting and retaining new workers. After all, most public employees in that state do not pay into Social Security. So without their pension, saving for retirement is difficult, to say the least. There have been legislative efforts for the last few years to bring back that defined benefit plan, but it doesn't look like it will be enacted this year, with the legislation bogged down on issues related to the state's operating budget. But generally speaking, we're expecting calm waters for the close of this year's other legislative sessions and see no major threat to public pensions. However, I should note that the volatile markets are causing pension asset valuations to drop. So if the markets stay low, that is to say lower than the heights of a few months ago, pension opponents will bang the drum on unfunded liabilities. Next year's legislative sessions could be challenging, with the possibility of more, quote, reforms being pushed in the legislatures. Whether we see them as reforms is a different issue. Also, I'm sure that all of you, if you're watching the news, are familiar with the Federal Department of Government Efficiency and what's been going on with that group's efforts to cut federal programs and thus federal spending. There are 26 DOGE-like committees at some point in their evolutions in the states. Now, many of those may fizzle out, but some could take hold and turn the microscope on state and or local government spending on pension benefits, among many of the other programs of interest to retirees in those states where those committees are. So that bears watching to see what the trends are. As you may be aware, Wisconsin's version is focused on government oversight and transparency. So it's known by its acronym, GOAT, or GOAT. Doge, GOAT, whatever, I guess. But the committee is made up of 8 state assembly members, 7 Republicans, and 1 Democrat. At this point, I can't tell you what the outcome of their look into state agencies and state-provided services will be, but that's something to keep an eye on as well for the interest that you all have. And then finally, many states are forecasting deficits, so that always adds pressure on government spending. So to recap on pension issues, this year looks calm, but next year we most likely have storm clouds building in some state legislatures. And thankfully for you, from hearing from John earlier, we know that this is not an issue for all of you and current public employees in Wisconsin. So I'm telling you all of that about what's happening in other states to let you know that, A, I think that you're really very lucky to have the well-funded, well-appreciated system that you have. And B, it's important to pay attention because that kind of support is unfortunately not universal. And it's always useful to know the trends in other states just to be clear about what could happen in your state. Right now, everything's looking good. So what I would say to you is you should be very proud of the system you have and the benefits you get. Yeah, the last thing I want to say is that one of the important things that ARP does is we bring to bear resources to fight for issues we care deeply about. Now, a lot of those resources are informational materials on the issues I've talked about, as well as so much more that you can find on our website, which is www.aarp.org. But another crucial resource we have at our disposal is our amazing campaigns team. And a great resource there is my colleague and definitely a Wisconsin resident, Lisa Lampkins. So let me turn things over to her to talk about some of our important campaign work. Lisa?
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. And just so folks are aware, we'll do questions for both Adam and I at the end when I finish talking. So you can feel free to start even just putting any questions for Adam in the Q&A section. But I am excited to be back chatting with this amazing group again. Adam mentioned, and some of you know, I used to work for the AARP Wisconsin State Office, but a couple of years ago, I joined our national campaigns team in the national office. So I work with 9 states now on planning and developing and executing their advocacy campaigns. And Adam and NRTA have been great partners in our advocacy work. I really appreciate Adam's rundown of what's happening at the federal level because it shows just how many issues that AARP is continuing to fight for. And his was really just a high level look. But, you know, we're always really making sure that AARP is a wise friend and a fierce defender. And in doing that, I want to talk about 2 of our top priority campaigns right now, caregiving and Social Security. But I'm going to talk on the ways that we work to influence legislation, why our members and our activists are so important. Plus, I'll share a couple of ways that you can get involved. And, you know, hopefully this just gives you a little bit of motivation to keep up the good advocacy work. Or if you haven't been engaged in any advocacy work, it might, you know, get you interested in doing so. So I'm going to start with our caregiving campaign. You know, Adam mentioned our top priorities to get a tax credit for unpaid family caregivers. And we sort of came up with the theme around this campaign of I am a caregiver. And that is because caregiving's a bipartisan issue, first of all, and it touches the lives of so many people. You've either been a caregiver, you will be a caregiver, or you're going to be somebody who needs a caregiver. The challenge is a lot of people don't even recognize or realize that they're caregivers. So one of the things that we had to do was to first help define what a family caregiver is. So we did a lot of education to help people realize if you're taking responsibility for helping out your parents or your spouses or any other loved one stay at home, maybe you're helping with things like medications or medical care or preparing meals or doing chores around the house or taking them grocery shopping. All of those kinds of things are the things that caregivers do. And we know that the family caregivers put family first. On average, caregivers spend 20 hours a week on caregiving, often on top of their job and other responsibilities, you know, like kids. And Adam mentioned that they spend an average of $7,200 out of their own pocket. And that's where AARP felt, okay, that's one way that we can really make a difference. You know, we can help caregivers, you know, maybe with more time, with resources, and to really help on this financial angle. And we know that these family caregivers are super tapped out. We've listened to family caregivers. Many of us have experienced that family caregiving part, you know, firsthand. And what has been so helpful is this is where we have really been able to rely on and leverage our AARP volunteers and our members to really help get this issue in front of Congress and the president. A lot of people don't think about family caregivers. It's really, you know, kind of unsung heroes. It's silent and in the background. But AARP laid a lot of groundwork behind the scene last year during the presidential campaign. And at one point last fall on the campaign trail, Donald Trump said that he would support a tax credit for those who take care of parents or a loved one. So this finally gave us an in and a way to elevate the issue with Congress. So we really started asking, why should Congress prioritize a tax credit for family caregivers? And our answer was really the basis of our campaign. And we answered with 100 different reasons, one reason for each day of the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. So it was a big social campaign, also evolved into a paid media campaign and earned media. But on social media, we posted 100 reasons, one reason a day. We shared facts, figures, stories from around the country, and we really tried to get stories from. For example, we had a story from Walt in Wisconsin who said, I put a pretty good nest egg together for our retirement, but Alzheimer's took care of that. I would be very much in favor of legislation that would support the caregiver. Being a caregiver for 17 years, I could have used some help. Or we had another story, this was on day 72, from Sharon in Alaska, who said, it would help immensely. I am slowly seeing our savings go down, but I'm able to continue to care for my spouse in our home. And that is really like the reason behind everything that we do. We know that our work impacts people. It impacts not only older adults across the country, but families as well. So we continue fighting for this key piece. We're doing lots of things on the caregiver front, but fighting for this caregiver tax credit has been huge. We've done paid advertising. We have had 1 million meetings with those people that Adam mentioned who are working on these budget reconciliation tax packages. But I will tell you, the most, I think, impactful thing are things that you all could do. So, how could you get involved? I suspect that many folks on this call have had some personal or family experience with caregiving. And just so you know, at the very end, I'll share a couple of resource slides that have some of the websites that Adam and I have talked about. But just be thinking about some of the ways that you could help are to share your stories. And this holds true at both the national level and the state level. We always need stories. Stories illustrate the reason why something's important. We've talked a lot here about this federal caregiver tax credit, but we also have states who are fighting for similar state level tax credits. And Wisconsin is one of those states. Only 2 states so far have passed a state level caregiver tax credit. That's Oklahoma and Nebraska. But Wisconsin is working on that. So, I encourage you to stay in touch with AARP Wisconsin. And again, I'm going to share some of their contact information. But if there's some way that you can share a story with them, you might be able to make a difference here in the state. Of course, as always, and if you're a member of AARP, we've probably asked you in the past couple of months to send an email to Congress. Our message to Congress around caregiving has been America needs family caregivers and they need a tax credit. So we have easy ways where you can communicate with members of Congress. And so those are, maybe simple, maybe they're not so simple, maybe it's something you've never done before, but we have really good resources that can help you lift your voice if you have something to share or if you feel any passion around caregiving. I want to turn now to Social Security, which of course has been in the news a lot lately. And recently we were able to really demonstrate the power of advocacy when AARP members and activists kicked into high gear following some proposed changes that the Social Security Administration announced earlier this spring. And it didn't really take us long to make a difference. And Adam mentioned a little bit of this, but just to sort of maybe further tease out the timeline, in mid-March, SSA proposed making changes to services that people could access via phone. And those changes would have made people either go in person to an SSA office or do their work online, which would be a burden for a lot of people. So we really responded with a clear message. Social Security Administration's got to work for the people who paid in to Social Security. So we mobilized our activists to call on Congress to protect and strengthen Social Security and to make sure that the Social Security Administration is responsive and accountable. So we started getting emails, calls, letters in there, and within about a week, SSA announced, okay, we're going to delay this implementation. We're not going to start April 1st, we'll start mid-April. But our response, that's not good enough. So once again, we rallied our members, our volunteers, the public, and we got over 2 million messages into Congress, emails, plus there were additional phone calls, petitions, people sharing their stories, and we kept up that drumbeat. And on the Friday before things were supposed to go into effect, we had every single state office, and we have offices in every state, plus 3 territories, as Adam mentioned. Every state did some social outreach or a press conference, or an op-ed, lots of different things to get this into the news and kind of out there what AARP was doing and how we were fighting to make sure that people could still access the Social Security Administration. A couple days before those changes were supposed to take place, SSA reversed their decision and said, nope, people can still continue to access customer service things by phone. And that's really the power of advocacy, and that's the power of your voice, which is why I wanted to take a little bit of time to sort of outline that. You know, AARP leadership had sent letters to the Social Security Administration and to Congress. Our lobbyists were meeting with SSA officials and members of Congress, but it was that barrage of calls and emails that really made a difference. And we know, and honestly, we've been working on the customer service issue at Social Security for a long time because it has not been stellar, as some of you might know. And I think all of that public attention, you know, sometimes it sort of drifts over into other things as well. When President Trump released his sort of skinny budget for this year, it included some flat funding for the Social Security Administration. So you might say, well, that does not sound like a win, but keeping the funding the same as opposed to getting a cut actually is a win in this instance. And there were some additional funds for program integrity. Now, none of this is a done deal, but it's really better than starting from behind. We know that with Social Security, there's still a lot of confusion and concern about possible changes at the SSA, like office closures or staff cuts or the safety of personal data. And I can assure you that AARP is keeping an eagle eye on all of these things. And we continue to be in contact with Congress and the Social Security Administration, you know, on top of all of those. All of these other changes and these things happened with an acting Social Security commissioner. The new SSA commissioner was confirmed last week. His name is Frank Bisignano. He's a former executive from Fiserv. And he was just on Fox News over the weekend. And he talked about that Social Security has been around for 90 years and he doesn't intend to break the system. He did say there was a tremendous opportunity to improve the agency by focusing on the integrity and the safety and security of Social Security numbers. And AARP's already reached out to the new commissioner, and we look forward to working with him to make sure that SSA improves their customer service and that they continue to improve for everybody who has paid into Social Security. We also just last week endorsed a bill called the Bonus Tax Relief for America's Seniors bill. Doesn't really roll off the tongue, but it is a bipartisan bill. People will describe it as eliminating the federal tax on Social Security benefits for those who pay those taxes. It does that in kind of a convoluted way. It actually increases the standard deduction for taxpayers 65 and older, and that increase would offset some or even all of the federal income tax charged on those benefit. So, it's not super clean, but the reason that we supported it is because it doesn't impact Social Security solvency like simply doing away with those taxes would. Of course, people are probably aware that the federal income taxes paid on Social Security benefits go into the Social Security Trust Fund. So if we just eliminate that, that impacts the solvency of Social Security. So, we'll be paying close attention to that and fighting to make sure that people, as always, have more money in their pockets. One of the things that we really do is to try to be a trusted voice of information on what's happening. So things like this new bill, things like pretty soon the trustees report on Social Security and Medicare will come out. Our AARP bulletin, if you're a member, every household gets the bulletin, and our aarp.org website always have great information and great articles. The website in particular will have something within a day if it's related to new legislation or something that's happening. So you can stay up to speed with some of these changes that are going on that will actually impact your life. So today, we are actually busily preparing for a big kickoff tomorrow. We are starting a countdown to the 90th anniversary of Social Security. And we're going to be elevating the importance of Social Security. We know how much people depend on it. There's going to be a countdown of activities with a variety of audiences in a variety of ways all across the country. So between May 14th and August 14th is the official anniversary date of Social Security. States are doing all sorts of cool things. They're lighting up landmarks or doing educational events. There'll be webinars, there'll be fun events. And then in the month of August, every state is doing a couple of events to celebrate Social Security. In Wisconsin, I know they are planning to do some member outreach at a Forward Madison soccer game, at a Milwaukee Milkmen baseball game. I know they have an activity planned in lacrosse. And I also know they're planning to do a telephone town hall with Senator Baldwin. And so again, I'll share the Wisconsin office information with folks if you want to get involved or want more information on that. So you're probably wondering, because I've said that several times now, how in the heck do I get in touch with AARP? Well, let's test my powers of sharing my screen, and I will hopefully get these. Let me put this into. Okay, so hopefully you can see. I'm kind of going back now to where I started. No matter where you go, if you start out at aarp.org, that is our main webpage, and you can get to any of these places by navigating through. It is sometimes, though, not super easy to navigate through the aarp.org site. So if you're interested in caregiving, you can go to aarp.org/caregiving. You see our cool I Am a Caregiver logo. And on this page, you can find ways to send a letter to a member of Congress. You can sign a pledge. But there is also a ton of resources for caregivers, including state-specific information if you need help with caregiving. So lots of fantastic information on this caregiving webpage. In terms of Social Security, of course, we have a couple of different pages. When it comes to our fight in protecting Social Security, we have a page that is solely around advocacy, and that site is aarp.org/protect Social Security. And here's where you will see the stories about our efforts. You'll get to, this is where you could send a letter to a member of Congress, where you can sign up to be more involved in some of our advocacy efforts. You can volunteer, you can do a pledge, you can participate in member calls that we do. So lots of really great information on this advocacy page. Now we also have a general Social Security page that has other information, and that is just at aarp.org/Social Security. And I'll talk about a special feature on that in just a second. If you are a member of AARP, of course, you get the AARP bulletin, and this May-June issue right now is a special, it's like an 8-page edition that's just on Social Security and Medicare. It has a lot of really great information in it. And I know the July-August edition will have information about all of these events that I mentioned, sort of all around the country, actually. So I encourage you to take a look at the bulletin if you get it. And I also mentioned that I would share the information about Wisconsin. And I'm not sure if you can see the whole thing. The website, if you want to go to the Wisconsin State Office, is aarp.org/WI, or you can email them at wiaarp@aarp.org. Again, if you go to aarp.org and you search for Wisconsin State Office, you will find all of this information. One last thing I just kind of wanted to highlight, because it's a tool around Social Security that not very many people know about. We have an expert on staff who answers questions in, it's called Your Questions Answered tool. So you can go, and again, you can even get there from aarp.org/Social Security, or you can go directly to the tool at answers.aarp.org. And you can either search for a question if you're like, oh, I wonder what the income limits are for where a Social Security tax, where I have to pay those taxes. You can enter a question and you might, find an answer. But if you put a question in there and you don't find an answer, you can get your individual specific question answered by an expert within a couple of days. So that's just really a great tool that I think not a lot of people know about. So I'm going to just stop sharing there for just a second, and really just wanted to, I guess, finish off by letting people know that, we do better when we work together. And that is where, there's always been a great partnership, I know, within the AARP Wisconsin office and the Wisconsin Retired Educators Association. And I think on these issues that impact all of us, if we can, lift our voices together, they are always stronger. And that is why I look forward to continuing the efforts to work together. And as always, just appreciate everything that all of the groups here today have done. So,
Somebody has one while we're talking. Give them a moment to think about it. When Lisa was finishing up there, it reminded me of something that neither Lisa nor I mentioned today, because, of course, we're here to talk about our advocacy work, what's going on in Congress, our campaigns, and so on. But when she put up the web address for the Wisconsin office, it reminded me of something else, that our state offices do a lot of other things besides advocacy. And that includes events that could be of interest to you at the local level. So if you go to that ARP.org/Wisconsin WI website, you might find local events that you may be interested in. And that might be things like shredding events, so that you can bring your important papers to have them shredded if you don't have a shredder at home, but also movies, wine tasting, all sorts of things that are happening in your communities. So, that's another important thing that we do that's totally divorced from what we're talking about today. But when I saw it, it just reminded me, hey, we should tell people, if you're looking for something to do in your local community, you may be able to find it through our website.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Lisa, for the great information. There was a lot there to digest. So thank you all for attending this virtual Wisconsin Coalition of Annuitants Conference. We hope that you will be able to join us tomorrow, May 14th, for the second part of the conference. Please take a moment at the end of this session to complete our brief survey. When you press the red Leave Meeting button, you will be directed to the survey. Completing the survey will help with future planning with these meetings and also give us some insights as to where we need to go next. So again, thank you very much for attending today and have a great day.